Good evening, my friends. I hope this message finds you in a quiet hour, a moment when the world's noise fades and the heart can finally listen. Because tonight, our eyes turn toward a desert that refuses to sleep, a land where something ancient has awakened. It was not the sound of war that broke the silence of the Sahel. It was the sound of memory, a continent remembering its strength. When Niger's drone pierced the dawn sky above Talabri, it wasn't just metal and fire. It was history reclaiming its right to exist. For years, the world told Africa that it could not stand without a foreign hand, that order must be flown in, that justice must come with an accent. But that morning, the desert disagreed. It spoke in thunder. In that single strike, Niger did not just neutralize militants. It announced something deeper. Dependency is over. The Sahel, once labeled ungovernable, now fought and won on its own terms. And somewhere in Ouagadougou, a young captain named Ibrahim Traoré heard that message. To him, it wasn't a battle report. It was a call. A call to finish what others had begun. The fight for absolute sovereignty. Because the truth is simple. When a people stop asking for permission, power shifts. When nations once treated as pawns start to act as players, the world must redraw its maps. That morning, near the sands of Talabri, even the dunes seemed to hold their breath. A shape emerged above the horizon, cutting through the pale blue like a memory taking form. It wasn't a Western drone circling from afar. It was Niger's own creation, a Turkish-built Axer reborn under African command, a steel hawk carrying more than explosives. It carried centuries of deferred pride. Below, men of the Islamic State in the Sahel gathered in arrogance, believing the triangle of land between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso belonged to them. For years, they ruled through fear, burning villages, enslaving children, taxing farmers who had nothing left to give. But that morning, as the Axer hovered high, the balance of terror shifted. A code. Silence. Then thunder. The explosion rolled across the dunes like a wave over stone. It was not chaos, it was choreography. Within minutes, the camp that had haunted the Sahel for half a decade was reduced to silence. 94 fighters neutralized. One commander captured alive. But the true power of that moment was not in the number of dead. It was in the birth of coordination. For the first time, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso had struck together under the Sahel Alliance command. Air from Niger, intelligence from Mali, ground logistics from Burkina. The Western advisors once dictating every operation were nowhere in sight. The alliance had drawn its own map and chosen its own targets. And in Niamey, soldiers celebrated quietly. No champagne, no press conference, just a new kind of pride. One colonel said softly, "We may not have built the drone, but we built the courage to fly it." That line spread like wildfire across markets, radios, classrooms, because this was no longer about machines. It was about mindset. The realization that the Sahel, long defined by instability, was now writing its own definition of strength. Western media called it a tactical success. But in the Sahel, it was something else entirely. A moral turning point. The skies had become African again. And for a region that had spent decades fighting with borrowed tools, that meant everything. Days later, the world witnessed another shock. The captured commander of ISIS Sahel was not flown to Europe. He was not delivered to any international tribunal. Instead, a small convoy drove him south to Niamey. There, behind unmarked gates, stood a new building. Above its doors, 3 intertwined spears framed a balanced scale. The sign read, Sahel Criminal Court. For the first time in modern history, the Sahel declared legal independence. Justice was coming home. Inside, there were no translators from The Hague, no polished suits from Geneva. Only the languages of the Sahel: Hausa, Zarma, Arabic, Fulani. The chief prosecutor was a woman who had lost both brothers in a jihadist raid. When she stood to read the charges, her voice did not tremble. It carried the calm weight of a century that had finally found its witness. Outside, thousands gathered under the blazing sun. They weren't chanting for revenge. They were watching something sacred: justice in their own hands. Western media dismissed it as symbolic, but in the Sahel, symbolism was substance. To speak judgment in your own tongue is to reclaim your dignity. When the sentence came, life imprisonment without parole, there was no applause. Only silence. A silence so deep that even the wind paused. Because in that silence, the Sahel did something no empire expected. It judged itself and stood unbroken. In the days that followed, something spread faster than any rumor pried. From tea shops to classrooms, one phrase echoed, "They took our gold, our land, our children. Now, for the first time, we take back the meaning of justice." The Sahel court became more than an institution. It became a mirror, showing that sovereignty is not just over land, but over truth. Western analysts called it legal nationalism. On the ground, they called it dignity. Then came the next wave: political independence. In Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before the Transitional Assembly, still in his brown field uniform. No ceremony, no applause. Only the sound of boots on marble. "The war is not over," he said. "It has only changed terrain." And with those words, he dissolved the National Electoral Commission, once praised abroad as democracy's guardian, but long accused of serving foreign interests. "Democracy cannot be imported in cargo planes," he declared. "Burkina Faso will organize its destiny, not its donors." Western diplomats called it a coup within a coup, but outside, the people called it correction. For decades, they had voted under supervision, while their gold left through foreign ports, and their sons died in wars financed from abroad. Now, as Traoré's signature dried, the streets exhaled. Not in anger, but in relief. That night, he spoke from a wooden desk lit by a single lamp. Behind him, no colonial portraits, only the flag and a photograph of Thomas Sankara. "The empire ruled us," he said, "because we believed it could not be defeated. That illusion ends tonight." By dawn, his words echoed from Niamey to Bamako. For the first time, the Sahel wasn't repeating foreign news. It was creating it. He knew the price: sanctions, smear campaigns, frozen aid. But he also knew the truth. Revolutions without builders collapse. "We are masons," he told his cabinet. "The foundation must be ours, even if the walls take generations to rise." His government looked nothing like the ministries of the past. Around the table sat soldiers, teachers, market women, people who smelled of dust and diesel. It was not elegance. It was authenticity. Foreign media called him anti-democratic. But on the ground, a new definition was forming. Democracy as perpetual participation, not periodic permission. Then came the counter-offensive, not with armies, but with spreadsheets. Aid suspended. Accounts frozen. Officials blacklisted. The empire striking back with bureaucracy instead of bombs. But Traoré only smiled. "If dependence is development," he said, Then let underdevelopment be our independence. Trade rerouted through Lome and Conakry. Factories restarted slow, imperfect, but theirs. Farmers said, when you stop drinking from a poisoned well, the first days are dry. But then the rain tastes different. That phrase became a proverb of the revolution. By spring, the streets changed. Graffiti once written in French now appeared in Moray and Dula. Children painted drones and tractors side by side. Symbols of war and work fused into one. And in Niamey, the leaders of Niger, Mali, and Burkina met. They spoke not of borders, but of blueprints. Our alliance, Traoré said, is not a barricade against the world. It is a door we finally built ourselves. Hope rose higher than inflation. Hardship had meaning. Better a rough road we pave, a taxi driver said, than a smooth one leading back to slavery. From Paris to Washington, the response was predictable. Headlines read, Burkina turns inward. Niger defies the West. Mali risks isolation. But for the first time, the Sahel was not waiting for approval. The sanctions hit. And yet, there was no collapse. Because what the West mistook for weakness was, in truth, resilience. Mining contracts once written in Paris were rewritten in Niamey. Our gold cannot feed other men's banks, while our children eat dust, Traoré said. Mali nationalized lithium. Niger redirected uranium not to Europe, but to African grids. The Sahel's wealth began to circle within Africa. Markets trembled. But the streets did not. People called it the drought before the rain. And then came the moment of rebirth. In Timbuktu, the ancient city of scholars, the crossroads of African wisdom, 3 leaders met, Tani, Goa, and Traoré. No entourage. No spectacle. Only parchment, sunlight, and silence. They signed the Strategic Charter of the AES, an alliance of defense, development, and destiny. Traoré spoke last. For centuries we were told unity was a dream, but dreams are what the free dare to build in daylight. The hall fell silent. Outside, the desert wind carried those words into eternity. Because this was more than an agreement. It was a declaration that the Sahel would no longer be defined by what it lacked, but by what it could create. From that day, Timbuktu stopped being a relic of the past. It became the workshop of Africa's next era. And somewhere beyond the dunes, the empire still holds its maps, but their meaning has changed. Because the Sahel is no longer waiting to be rescued. It has remembered what every empire forgets. That the desert is not empty. It listens. It endures. And when the moment comes, it awakens.